so that it's available, and we'll post these after our second version of each of the sessions. We'll post them on the website so that people who weren't able to attend in the summer but want to look something up can. We'll also post on the website a PDF of today's presentation, but that we will send to you later today as well, so that you'll have that. So you can take notes as you want, but don't feel like you have to write everything down. Attendance form will be sent out at the end as always. This is a 2-hour session, so you'll be paid for 2 hours, but you must fill that out in order to get in the list where that's going to prompt you to get paid at the end of the summer and to get your CPDUs. We do have additional sessions. We're going to mention a couple today that will touch on ideas today, but we have more in-depth sessions on those ideas that have to do with course mapping. But you can find those on our website, and also Glenbrook North teachers, a couple Glenbrook South teachers are offering a session on Edpuzzle, and then the district office is offering some tech sessions. So watch out for all those emails and everything as well. So what's our goal for today? In our workshop today, we'll rethink what's most important, outline an assessment plan, and consider the learning events needed in our first unit in e-learning. We aimed and put that word first in there, first unit, because that's what seems most practical, but I think you'll have to think about for yourself and discuss if you're with a group today, what unit it will be for you, because I do think some people might want to shift units around. I know some talk in various teams has been, well, we did all those e-units in the spring. Could one of those actually be taught first this year, so that we're not recreating all those videos and everything that we had done before, and we can actually work on making the unit better? So when you get to your time to think, you can think about, is it your traditional first unit, or is there another unit you might want to make first? Here's our agenda, and I'll just run through this quickly because there's a lot going on, but just so you get the gist of it, we're gonna spend a few minutes here with information and strategies. We're gonna break out in groups to brainstorm. Today, the groups are by discipline. So many of you emailed Matt, and thanks to Matt for getting this all set up in advance, so that the breakout groups are preset. So those of you who've been to a lot of our sessions, so far we've only used the random settings for breakout groups, but today is our first attempt to do the preset groups, and everyone is either in a team they requested or in a discipline alike team, so that you can have more feedback on your particular work. There'll be some independent time, which Matt later will describe. You can do that as independently or with your group as you want. We'll do a little bit of information on assessments. We'll break back out into the groups, come back, and then continue to work. So it's going to be a lot of back and forth today, and we'll keep you updated on how much time each section is. And Matt, when you do the breakouts, if you could set the time, that way they can see the timer in there, and they'll help them keep track of how much time they have in their breakout. So those of you who've been here know a little bit about John Hattie and his effect sizes, but we just want to make sure everybody knows we like to ground our what we talk about in our sessions in research. And John Hattie's done a lot of research of combining many studies to find the effect sizes of certain inputs on education. And he's done that for things that we do in school, but things that happen outside of school. And he's determined that 0.4 is 1 year of growth in 1 year's time. So anything greater than 0.4 is kind of the inputs that we want to focus on, because we want to have as much impact as we can. And for today's session, this variable of teacher clarity is really the closest link and the biggest bang for the buck. It has a 0.75 effect size. And teacher clarity includes a whole bunch of things, and I want to read them off so that we can see, like, several are included today. The components are clarify what students are learning, which we're going to spend a good amount of time on. Plan the summative assessments accordingly, which we'll also talk about. Sequence your lessons logically. Give clear explanations. Have students practice, and have them take that assessment that you plan. And if we do these things with fidelity, we get a high impact on student learning. So today, the whole session is going to be around those first 3 items of setting your, clarify what they're learning, plan your summative assessment, and then sequence your lessons. So what's our rationale for the session today? We really have 2. We want to give time and space to critically analyze preparing for our units in this unknown time, and trying to think through how we can better do what we already do well in an e-learning environment. And then we wanted to create a collaborative process to focus that work, because as we know, when we're thinking about curriculum in particular, it's really helpful to have partners in doing that. So we're going to get started right away with the breakout room. We would like you, Matt's going to put you in these groups. Introduce yourself if you don't know the people in your room. Many of you will know everybody, but I'm sure some of you will meet somebody new. And then discuss the ideas of what you hope to rethink during this workshop today. So
all right, everybody.
Yep.
I think we're back. Beautiful. Sorry about that. So all the rooms uploaded, but then it only populated half the people, and we're not quite sure why. So we are going to honor all of your requests. There's going to be individual work time that we had planned anyway. And during that time, I'm just going to hand schedule everyone into their requests. I just printed off the Excel spreadsheet. So we'll be able to do that. But we apologize about that little technical snafu there. We're not quite sure what happened. But back to the presentation. So essentials at the unit level. Some of us are talking about standards. Some of us use essential questions. Some of us use themes. We use a variety of ways to talk about how we want to talk about the essential, but what it is that that students need to discover at that is they need to know what they need to do, what they need to know, and what they need to understand to be successful in that unit. Some of you might have heard that as CUD, the KUD of a unit, but that's what students need for the clarity of understanding the unit. Another essential of a unit is the focusing on formative feedback prior to beginning a unit, so that you know what are the steps of formative feedback I'm going to be giving students to reach that KUD, and what do I need to know, or what do students need to know, do, and understand, and how am I going to know that they're achieving those goals before we get to the summative. And then it helps students if they keep the goal of the unit in mind and identify what is important to help review and ask clarifying questions. So the better they understand the KUD, the better they'll be able to ask pertinent questions, and the better they'll be able to review and understand what they need to do as well. So it's not so much about the spoon feeding idea as much as giving them clarity, especially when we're not standing right in front of them. And then within that, we have essential topics. So, there's the overarching essential ideas, and then there are the topics. What are your units? What are you covering within that unit that's going to help kids reach that KUD? It should align with your unit level objectives. And I know I'm guilty of throwing a random thing in and then realizing it didn't fit in with the unit. Steve Farber, KUD is knowing, understanding, and doing. So students know what they need to know, understand what they need to know, and are able to do what they need to know. That's what KUD means. Providing clarity to essential questions or understanding. So the topic should help me discover more, and it should be sequenced in an appropriate way. And so when we go into this individual time, it's thinking about what do students need to know, understand, and do, and then how am I aligning all those things appropriately and sequencing them with my formative assessments to reach that summative of what I really think they should take away from that unit. So, you all received an email yesterday that had this template in there. If you haven't already done it, please make a copy of it so that you can work within this and do what's best for you. Some people need to print. I need to print it to have it physically in front of me. Some people would rather type in there. But do what works best for you to use this as a reference for you. We're going to post the template in the chat. I will do that right now. Just in case you didn't get it. And then once everybody's got their copy, we're just going to ask you to no, it's not. Okay, I'm going to put that in the chat in just a second, but we're going to ask everybody to start working. And so how we're going to have you work today is this is going to be individual work time. So during this individual work time, what we're going to be asking you to do is to turn off your camera and your mic. And we're going to give you 20 minutes of time to work. And if you want to work with other colleagues, this might be a time to move yourselves into a Google Chat. That way the Zoom stays muted and it stays with the camera off, but you could still work with colleagues. And if you'd rather work individually, then you can just sit and work in a quiet environment. And these questions will stay posted on the screen, but looking at that step 1 of the chart and working through those ideas of what are students exploring, what skills do you want them to be learning, what standards are students addressing, and to what end? What's the why in all of this? So kind of really thinking through the step 1 of that chart and working on all of that. So we're gonna give everybody 20 minutes. So we're gonna have everybody come back at 9:50.
So the next thing we're going to talk about just for a few minutes is assessment, and then give you more time to go back and work. But before we get started on that, I would just like to add in a couple of more behind the scenes strategy things. That one time I talked, I had to get Matt a message, and he was so busy that I couldn't text him for him to see it. But yeah, you could hear me. So one thing we could have done, and this could be a good tool in class when you want to give individual work time, is you can send everyone to their own breakout room to work. That way they can't hear anything anybody else is doing, or if students are making noise, or if the instructor's making noise, or that kind of thing. We didn't do that now because Matt was using that breakout room feature to build the breakout room. So he wouldn't be able to build it if you were in a breakout room. So that's why we had made the decision to do that. But I think that could be a great tool in a lot of circumstances in class. You just want to give people 2 minutes to write a paragraph or something, you could use that tool. But on assessment, so some key points about assessment, and of course, we're really not going to be able to dig into this topic today. It's a big topic. We do have a session coming up on Friday on summative assessments, and it's offered again in August sometime. I have the date here somewhere, but so it's offered a couple of times. So if this is something you want to dig into a little bit more, you certainly could come to those sessions with your team as well, or just you. But you know, as those of you who've been in our sessions know, we're getting a lot of our background info and things from work that's coming out of Northwestern and work that's coming out of Stanford on how they're training their professors for e-learning in the fall. And one of the things both of them say is there's really no such thing, and we know this, but as 100% test security. So kind of to just give up on that idea of looking for that way to get the security that we really want. Our district does not have monitoring software, so we're not going to talk about that. There is monitoring software where you can watch students' eyes movement and stuff like that. Northwestern has it. But I mean, for us, we see this as a temporary issue, hopefully, that we're doing this online. We know that teachers are very concerned about protecting their current exams. That's where the kind of trouble comes in the thinking is like, well, I don't want to put my current exam up on Mastery Manager because then they can copy it. And I've spent years on those exams in perfecting them and making them be the best they can be. So what can we do if we can't do all of those things? So one of the things that we're going to be promoting in our assessment session, which we'll talk a little bit, which we'll talk much more in depth in when we get to that on Friday, but is this focus on learning and trying to be creative and maybe coming up with new ways of assessing or slightly different ways of assessing that you can use in this temporary format. So something you feel pretty good about, but that doesn't use your current assessments. But that, I think now we have a little more time than we did in the spring and grades are going to count. So maybe we can take a slightly different direction with those assessments. We also can set up expectations and teach students about those expectations in terms of exams and online exams. That, of course, won't solve all problems, but it could help. And when students feel they're enabled and informed and they know what the process is and it's a fair process, they're more likely to hold up the integrity of the exam. If you want, we offered a whole 2-hour session on setting expectations and building them for your class. There's another one coming up on August 11th. If you're interested, you could come to that and your whole focus could be like, how do you want your expectations to be for your assessments, just for that narrow focus, and you can build that there. Give exams that lend themselves to academic honesty. So what would those look like? What's harder to cheat on than something else? And then this idea of we will have synchronous learning time. We don't know yet how much time that is and what it's going to look like exactly, but in previous conversations, it looks like it could be 30 to 45 minutes. So you could use your synchronous time for your assessment, which still doesn't prevent the cheating, but if you have from 8 to 8:30 for your assessment, for your synchronous time, you could use that for assessment. So at least they have to complete whatever you ask them to complete in that half hour. I assume if you're not using your synchronous time, you still can't say they have to do it at a particular time. But that would be one option as well. So what we'd like you to do is to work on that step 2 of that document. And if your group does not feel ready to move on to step 2, which is to think about the assessments, obviously stay where you are and do the work that you need to do. But that is the next step in this process of thinking through and mapping out your course. So you would want to get to that when it feels right. But we were asking you to brainstorm how you could collect assessment evidence for your unit while considering some of the e-learning limitations.
So we're going to talk about the flipped model. And before we get into that, one of the things that one of the things we did want to point out is, there have been some questions. There was a board meeting last night that a lot of people attended, and there's some anxieties around what's going to be happening, what's it going to look like, what would a hybrid model look like, and honestly, we don't have any of the answers. We don't know anything more than anyone else, but we do know that the district is working very hard from the district office to make it so that we do not have to create 2 lesson plans that we're delivering simultaneously. So they're looking at technologies where even if only half of your students are in front of you and half of your students are at home, that you're still just delivering 1 lesson plan. That's as much as we know. But so as we're thinking through the flipped model and what it would look like asynchronously and synchronously, we thought that might be just a good idea to keep in the back of your mind, that if something goes forward with this hybrid model, they're being very mindful of not creating double of the workload for us. And so as we're thinking through this and we're talking about the flipped model, this is something that has been recommended by both Stanford and Northwestern as a model to think through and to use in your classes as we're getting ready for this, what could potentially be a synchronous time with students and an asynchronous time, if that's hybrid or if that's e-learning. And so how could we think through that and leverage that asynchronous time with the synchronous time? There is going to be a session that's specifically going to delve much further into this called Building Your Lesson Plan Structure. And those sessions are going to be offered on July 24th and again on August 10th. And so if if that's something that you're interested in, that might be a session to attend. But the asynchronous time is kids are doing work on their own without you there. And then the synchronous time is the engaging in activities together as a class. And so the power of the split model is to use this asynchronous time to lead, to kind of get kids ready for the synchronous time. And so the asynchronous time is when you could record your lessons and potentially give kids guided notes. You could have readings or videos, and you can prompt for self-reflection, give kids a puzzle to kind of like stop at points where you know it's going to be difficult so they have to think through. You can give them guided online discussions with the, various different tools like Flipgrid. And then you can have lessons that have automated feedback so that they know how they're doing, so that when they come into that synchronous lesson, they're prepared to ask questions, and you can give feedback and kind of guide students on areas of misunderstanding. And during the synchronous time, then you can focus on building relationships, holding discussions about previous content, analyzing the literature, solving problems that potentially they had in their understanding, or that you see like an area where you could dig deeper, or you can just examine the material more deeply. So really using that synchronous time as a time to use feedback that you've already gained to structure it to make a more meaningful learning experience. And that's what that flip model is talking about. Because we know all we know right now is we're not going to have 90 minutes of class every other day. Beyond that, we don't know what that structure is going to look like, but we do know that. So we're going to give everybody individual work time to work on step 3 of your handout. So we want you to take time to consider potentially activities, experiences, or lessons that you use within the unit that you've been thinking about, how you could optimally sequence those activities or experiences or lessons, and then how you could differentiate for learners. So we really want you to think through how that could work, what you would need to pare down to really give the kids that essential learning that you're going to need, and how you could organize that for the e-learning model that's coming. What we're going to do is we're going to push you all back out to the breakout rooms you were just in. Some people want to work with partners, some don't. So what we're going to do is we're going to push you out to those breakout rooms, and then what we would ask is take 5 minutes, think by yourself, and then if you want to work with your group, go ahead and turn on the cameras. If you want to just have this be individual time, keep your camera and mic off, and you can just work by yourself. But this is the best way to give people the flexibility to either work with the team that they potentially wanted to work with, or to work by themselves.
Thank you, everybody, for all that work you've done today so far. We hope it's been useful to work in your discipline teams. What we'd like to do before we come back and close up is to go into random rooms and share some of the work you've done. And the reason for this is we've learned in our jobs, we get to dabble in all the disciplines. And we find that when we work outside of our discipline, first of all, we learn a lot because people think about things differently. So you've put a lot of time today into your ideas. But now if you see other ideas from other disciplines, you might be able to push your ideas a little bit further.
So with time ending, we just wanted to say thank you for attending this session. We know that there are a lot of unanswered questions. We have a lot of questions too, about what is coming our way in just a few weeks. But we wanted to give everybody a structure that could work in or out of e-learning or whatever that would look like, just so that we can all start to think about that. And that was kind of what we wanted to have be the purpose of this session. And we just want to give you a template that you could use over and over again, and to give you a place where you can come back and reflect later as you're thinking about the fall. So as we're wrapping up, please make sure to fill in the attendance form.